It's been over a month since I last made a video, but I'm finally done with school. I'm on summer break and it just feels so good to be home. Fantastic Mr. Fox is directed by Wes Anderson, co-written by him and Noah Baumbach. It's of course based on the book by Roald Dahl and features the voices of George Clooney, Meryl Streep, Jason Schwartzman, and Eric Anderson. And in Fantastic Mr. Fox, this fox, voiced by George Clooney, goes back to his old ways of being a thief. He begins to steal from these three very dangerous farmers who all get really mad at him and pretty much go after him and his family with the intent of killing him. Now this is kind of interesting for me because this is only my second Wes Anderson movie ever next to the Grand Budapest Hotel, and I don't know why I haven't watched more of his stuff because I really loved the Grand Budapest Hotel. It's also really interesting for me that I haven't read the book Fantastic Mr. Fox because I love Roald Dahl, so yeah, I don't know why I haven't done that, especially when I love this movie this much because I really do enjoy Fantastic Mr. Fox. I think it's brilliantly animated, and I think, Wes Anderson really has his fingerprints all over it, from the way it's directed to the way it's written. Let's talk about the animation for a second. The animation in Fantastic Mr. Fox is stop motion animation. It's not like old school claymation in Aardman movies, or it's not also like how Laika makes their movies. The production company that made Coraline and Paranorman, they use like figurines that feel a lot more solid. But here in Fantastic Mr. Fox, the character models are very almost ragdoll looking, and just like any other Wes Anderson movie, the backgrounds, the interiors, the environments in general are very intricately detailed, and I think all of this really helps make the realistic tone of the movie much more plausible. Like you stop thinking of Fantastic Mr. Fox as a kids movie just because it's animated, because in my opinion, Fantastic Mr. Fox is not a kids movie at all. It's very mature. What's cool about the character models is that you can tell that they're really made up of individual like strands of fur and whatnot, and they really have this old world feel to them that I think supports both Wes Anderson's style of filmmaking and Roald Dahl's style of kind of dark storytelling. And there are a couple of scenes I just want to highlight that really, for me, underline how sophisticated this movie is and how mature it really is, because there are a couple of scenes like the fight between Mr. Fox and this rat voiced by Willem Dafoe, and this scene where Mr. Fox and the other animals are looking at a wolf from the distance. I thought those scenes were just so striking, visually speaking. Wes Anderson movies also always have like really interesting soundtracks. There's this use of old school music in this movie that just somehow fits with the nostalgic tone. I think it kind of reflects how the character of Mr. Fox yearns for his older lifestyle as a thief. And whenever Alexandre Desplat does a score for a Wes Anderson movie, I think it's when he's most eclectic and versatile. Like there's a playfulness to his Wes Anderson scores that I don't think we get from any other movies that he has scored. What's surprising to me is that the sound in this movie is actually very layered and very present throughout the entire thing. There's lots of little audio details that do give the environment a feeling of being textured dynamically. Like you can really kind of tell that it's stop motion, but it doesn't distract you from the movie itself. And the fun thing about watching Fantastic Mr. Fox is that it's all very fast paced. This movie is under 90 minutes long, and it's the abrupt cuts that Wes Anderson movies have takes a little bit of time to get used to, but at this point it's really just like a take it or leave it kind of thing. It's definitely like a Wes Andersonism that if you didn't like it before, you're not gonna like it now, but if you do like it, you'll definitely enjoy the pace. But what I love about the editing in Wes Anderson movies is that no shot is wasted. Every time you get like a seemingly arbitrary kind of shot, it really, the editing always does serve to deepen the world and the characters. And it's interesting how this movie in particular kind of juxtaposes the trajectory of Mr. Fox's character and his son, Ash, played by Jason Schwartzman. And the really cool thing about the story in Fantastic Mr. Fox is it does go a lot deeper than expected, no pun intended, because at its very core, this movie is a heist film. It's just like a series of heists, but what's great is that slowly this movie chips away at its characters. And speaking of the characters, I do think that every single character here is extremely memorable and lovable. Every single fox here has to deal with like their own problems of sorts, and they all have different personalities. And everyone else in the movie, even if you don't really see them that much, they're just really great fun to meet, if only for their very distinct personalities. Like many Wes Anderson movies, the writing is very, very quirky and mature, and there's always like this dark and kind of dry sense of humor that goes along with it. It's really funny what they do with like the cuss words. Like whenever a character has to swear, they just replace that swear word with the word cuss. So they say stuff like, what the cuss is happening, and it's really, really interesting. George Clooney is a very natural fit for Mr. Fox. Like if you're really annoyed at his smugness, like his smugness actually comes into very good use in this character, and he manages to infuse that smugness with his real genuine ability to play sympathetic characters. Meryl Streep as Mrs. Fox is obviously very, very good. She is Meryl Streep after all. She has both a strength to her and a vulnerability. Jason Schwartzman voicing Ash, I didn't even notice Jason Schwartzman until the end of the movie. And I thought he did a great job because he's much more restrained in this movie than he usually is, which is great because you really do end up feeling a lot for Ash. And Eric Anderson as Ash's cousin Christopherson is a very good kind of counterpoint to Schwartzman's cynicism. And what's great about how Wes Anderson directs this movie is that he doesn't let the medium of animation kind of distract or detract from the way he really does direct movies. Like a lot of modern animated movies nowadays tend to become very gimmicky with their animation, and Wes Anderson does not do that. He always respects his characters and his script. And it's credit to him that this movie is just so endlessly fun to watch. Like, the set pieces he constructs are so brilliantly directed. Like, there's just this sense of movement throughout them that's really, really fun. But what's great also is that he always manages to infuse this feeling of nostalgia and melancholy into the movie. On the surface, these movies look very fun and quirky, but deep down, there's really like deep emotion to be found, and it elevates this movie from what could have been just like a cutesy kind of Roald Dahl adaptation into something that's really kind of like a character study. If I have any reservations about the movie, it's that occasionally some of the dialogue does become a bit self-indulgent. Like some characters will say some very Wes Anderson-y things that I personally don't believe adds at all to like the character or the plot or anything. It just kind of feels like Wes Anderson like didn't edit certain parts. Like they're just very, very him. And if you like that kind of stuff, then sure you can like it. But for me, it's a bit distracting. But all in all, I do think that Fantastic Mr. Fox is an awesome movie. It's really, really excellent. I can't imagine how Wes Anderson fans can't like this. But there's a reason why I'm talking about this movie, and why I'm not trying to complete my series of Oscar videos. I want to talk about this movie first because a lot of people told me to watch it, and while I was watching it, I really just couldn't help but think of a lot of my friends who have just graduated from college. And because there's a certain scene in the movie where Mr. Fox says, and I quote, "I think I have this thing where I need everybody to think I'm the greatest, the quote-unquote Fantastic Mr. Fox, and if they aren't completely knocked out, dazzled, and kind of intimidated by me, then I don't feel good about myself." And that's really something I really relate to. I get that feeling sometimes, and I realize that a lot of my friends, when they go out into the real world, they might end up feeling like that. It's really easy to get lost in the crowd of like generic faces and like kind of like lose your individuality out there in the real world. And I want my friends to know that you don't have to try and impress people, because later on in this movie, Mr. Fox also says something like, he calls everyone a wild animal, but that's what makes them special. Like the thing that makes you special, you already have it. You don't need to look for it. And I think if you just remember that and hold on to that, hold on to who you really are, then you don't need to impress anybody. You already have it in the bag. So I wish you guys the best of luck. I'm really gonna miss you all, and I love you all. But yeah, good luck, and don't forget us, I guess. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on Fantastic Mr. Fox. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.